Hi everyone, in this video we are going to see how do we create a Linux virtual machine and all the options we get while we create it. Also we'll understand how can we see the pricing of all the components related to virtual machines like the compute, storage, networking, etc. So let's go into the Azure portal and start creating it. So in the portal we'll click on virtual machines and I'll click on create. When you start creating a virtual machine, the first option you will need to choose the subscription where we want to place the VM and also where we get the charges. So I'll choose my subscription, which is testing environment, and I'll choose the random resource group like VM Insights. I'll give the name Linux VM. Next, I can choose the region where I want to place it. So I'll choose Central India itself. And next option which we get is the availability options. So in the availability option, we have multiple options. So no infrastructure redundancy required actually means we'll not have any additional features to automatically recover the VM whenever it goes down due to high load or when an entire data center goes down. Next is availability zone. So let me take you to the screen to show you the availability zone. So we have an Azure region like a central India that is based on Mumbai. In Azure in a region we have three availability zones, meaning each availability zone will be a physical location separated from each other and will have a different infrastructure, cooling and all other features. So that if one availability zone goes down, our services or resources will be up in another zone. So in here you can also see availability zone is a physical separate zone within an Azure region, and each zone has a distinct power source, network and cooling. So that basically means whenever a zone goes down, your VM will be up from other zone provided you have opted for the feature of availability zone. Next we have is a virtual machine scale set. Virtual machine scale set comes into picture when we want to load balance the VMs. So whenever there is an increase in traffic or the resources are high on the VM, scale set will automatically create another VM to handle that increase in load or increase in traffic so that our applications are working without any downtime. So there is no cost which you pay when you opt for this feature, but whenever your another machine comes up to load balance the traffic, you will get charged for that extra additional resource. Next option which we get is the availability set. So availability set within a single data center. So that is basically will help you in whenever the Azure does behind the scenes the maintenance and upgrades. It will automatically switch to a different rack within a data center during that upgrade. For this, I'll select no infrastructure redundancy required. Next, I'll go to security type. So earlier we used to have only the standard, the basic one. Now the Azure has provided us the trusted launch virtual machines and the confidential virtual machines. So with the standard you get the basic features for your VMs like basic securities, and with the trusted launch virtual machines it's for the Gen 2 virtual machines with the features like the secure boot and the virtual trusted platform module. So this will add extra layer of security for your virtual machines, but keep in mind whenever you are opting for the trusted launch virtual machines or confidential virtual machines, you need to keep track of the various features you won't be able to use like the backups or any other service which Azure does to keep the integrity of your VM. I'll choose the standard and I'll proceed to image. And image is basically what operating system you want to use or what in Linux, or it could be a Windows. For this I'll choose the RHEL 9.5 Gen 2. Next option which we get is the VM architecture. You can choose the 64 or the ARM64 architecture. The benefit you get with the 64 architecture is the most software are compatible with this kind of architecture, and with the ARM architecture you get the 50% better price performance than comparable into 64 VMs, and the softwares are less compatible with the ARM64. So I'll proceed with this and I'll go to next, which we get is the Azure Spot discount. So whenever we choose the Azure Spot discount, what Azure does is behind the scenes they have a capacity which is not being utilized and is kind of available to customers to use. So what Azure does is it gives those free capacity which it has at a very low discounted rates for the customers, and they can use this option whenever the workload the customer is hosting on the VM are not of production grade and can handle the downtime. Because whenever there is a need of those capacity, the Azure remove the spot discount VMs automatically. So I'll unselect this one and I'll proceed to size. So in the size you can go to see all sizes, type down the required CPU like if I want 4 and I click on OK. It will automatically show me only the 4 RAM, also like 8. So this test I'm going to use the cheaper one. The next we have is hibernation. So what hibernation does, whenever you deallocate your virtual machine, the content of the RAM is stored to the root storage, which will allow you to, whenever you restart your VM, the reboot will be the quick and will automatically get started from where it was stopped. This will also install an agent which will support this functionality. So next is authentication type. This will how you will log into your virtual machine. So we have two criteria, your username and the password. Then you can use your public IP, or if you have the private network, then you can log in directly. With the SSH public key, you will give the name cloud with area, and with the public key source you can use an existing public key, or you can use the key stored in the key vault, or you can generate a new key pair. For this I will create a new key pair and I'll give the name test. Next is the inbound port rules. So whatever port rules you define here, the traffic to your virtual machine will be allowed. So this will be the default or which you can use. For now, I'll allow the HTTPS and SSH. This will basically allow the inbound traffic, which will be the 844322. Next is licensing. So licensing comes under play when you are in the agreement with the Microsoft. If you have the licenses with the software, that will allow you to have a significant discount on the softwares, and the only cost you'll get in your virtual machine will be the compute and storage, not the software. I'll show more of this under the pricing at the later. Next, I'll go to disk. So in the disk, what we have is the encryption at host. So this option we need to enable at the subscription level first. So this will encrypt your ephemeral disk and the temporary disk. So I'll not use this one. I'll go to the OS disk size. So your OS size we can define in here what you want to use. I'll keep the default one and I can specify the disk type. So whatever is in the locally redundant storage means it is within a single data center as it is mentioned here. So standard STD is for, like you can see that the guidance here as well, best for backup, non-critical and infrequent. SSD is for web servers, lightly used enterprise application and dev test, and the premium is production and the performance sensitive workload. For most cases you are good to go with standard SSD. And next option we get is the zone redundant storage. So what this does is it replicates your data availability zones and will also incur you more cost. In this we do not see the option of STD. We have the premium SSD and the SSD disk. I'll use the standard SSD. This feature does is it whenever you delete your VM, the disk is also going to get deleted with the VM with it. And the key management is how you want to encrypt your disk. So we are going to use the platform managed keys. So these keys are managed by the Azure itself, which basically encrypts your data at rest. We can also use the customer managed keys in place when you have your own keys and want to encrypt the data disk with your keys. We can enable the ultra disk compatibility, which has the enhanced performance if you want. Next we have is data disk for Linux VM. These are additional disks if you want to attach to the VM. I'm going to create a new one, 0, and the source type will be the empty. I'm going to choose the size 4 gigabytes and the storage type to HDD. Next, I'm going to go to networking. So in here we can specify a virtual network where we want to place your VM, and you will get the private IP which your VM will get from here. So I'm going to use the default which Azure will create and the default subnet also, and the public IP to access my VM. I can create new from here as well, and the VNet all. I'm going to use the default Azure provided. So NIC NSC is the security group which gets attached to your virtual machine. So any inbound and outbound traffic that flows in and from your VM, you can restrict or grant the access from your security groups. For this, you can go to advanced, create according to our needs, or we can use the basic one in which will just allow the basic features for the inbound. So next, public inbound ports I'm going to allow. I want to do SSH to the VM. We can also allow the HTTP or HTTPS traffic. Next we have is delete public IP and NIC when VM is deleted. This will automatically delete the NIC and public IP also. I can enable this or not. This is up to your use case if you want to use it. And if your VM size or SKU allows the accelerated networking, this will have fast networking support on your VM. So my size which you have selected doesn't allow it, so I can't enable it. Next we have is load balancing. So in Azure we have load balancer and application gateway. Whenever we select any of the feature here, it will automatically add to the backend pool of our load balancer or application gateway to route the traffic from there. Next we have is management. So Microsoft Defender for cloud is the threat protection and security management is the cloud native solution. So this can provide you the vulnerability, the security scanning, all those features. So next we have is identity. Identity comes into play whenever you want your VM to access another resource like the key vault, VM or storage. So your VM will access all these other Azure services with the managed identity. So if you are going to use this functionality, you have to enable the identity, or you can enable it later on also. Next is Microsoft Entra ID. So if you enable this option, if you want to access your Linux or Windows virtual machine, so what this feature will do is you or any other user in the Microsoft Entra ID or previously Active Directory, if any of the user want to access these virtual machines, if you have enabled this option, you need to give up RBAC role assignment, which is a virtual machine administrator login or a virtual machine user login to that user, and that will allow the user to access the virtual machine with the Microsoft Entra ID credential. I have already uploaded an entire video how you can enable and use this feature for a Linux virtual machine. I'll give the link of the video in the description. Next we have is enable auto shutdown. This feature will automatically shut down your VM, and enable backup to schedule your backup at regular interval according to your needs. Next we have is the OS update. So in the Linux virtual machine we have is the image default, meaning you have to install patches on your virtual machines yourself. Patches will not be automatically installed by Azure or Microsoft. In the Windows we get a various options like the automatic by OS, Azure orchestrated or manual updates. So you can choose the manual updates if you are using your own patching solution like an SCCM, or your team deploys the patches on the VM at a defined schedules. You can use the Azure orchestrated, meaning Azure will do the upgrade, and automatic by operating system, it will be done by the Windows automatic. So I'll use the image default and I'll proceed to next monitoring. So in the monitoring section, we have an alert option here. So we can click on this, and this will allow you to have basic alerts which you can set up for the VM which we create. So this will include the memory, the CPU, the disk, storage, etc. This will be applied only to this virtual machine. If you're using the multiple virtual machine and set up alert on those rather than on a single VM, we can use the data collection rule and the Azure monitor agent that will help you to collect data at a particular location, and we can set up alert on that data. There is a separate video which I made for how can we set up alerts with the new Azure Monitor agent for multiple VMs at scale. I'll post the video link also in the description. So you can see here we have percentage, CPU, memory, disk data, IOP, network, and all those we can configure in here. And we can choose the email also here where we want to get notified, and we can use the existing action group which has all the emails. So I'll cancel for now, and I'll unselect this one, and I'll go to next boot diagnostics. So boot diagnostics is the feature which I'll show you when the VM is created. This feature will basically allow you to see the boot diagnostics, meaning the screenshots of your virtual machines from the Azure where currently it is hung or any other state or in the login. Also, if you want to do a serial console like access your virtual machine directly through Azure instead of PuTTY or any other place, you can use the serial console feature. I can use the custom storage account which is created already, or we can use the recommended which Azure will automatically create and handle. I can also use the OS guest diagnostics which will get metrics from your VM for every minute. I can also enable the application health monitoring. So this will allow you to check the application in your VM is running or not. So we can define the protocol for your application and the port number and the path so that we can get notified also whenever it goes down. Next we have is advanced. So in the advanced option, you can select an extension you want to deploy from directly while VM is created, or you can install any extension later on also. Extension can be like Azure Monitor Agent, which monitors your VM, or it could be the backup agent, which does the backup. Next we can install the VM application also when the VM is created. Next we have is custom data. So custom data will allow you to pass a script. So when the VM is created, you want to install a particular software or want to do any configuration file changes or any other data, you can do while it's being provisioned. For this creation, I'm going to install the Apache on the VM. So this command will automatically install the Apache on the VM. Next we have is user data. So you can use the user data also to pass a script or configuration file, and this will applicable for the lifetime of the virtual machine whenever it is started. Next we have performance NVMEs. This will provide you high disk storage performance. Go further to host. If you are using a Azure dedicated host, there is a group which will get created, and if you want to place this VM on that particular, you can use the placement groups. I do not have any, so I'm going to go further. Capacity reservation. So the capacity reservation, when you have done with Azure, it will allow you you to have size or SKU always for your workload. Whenever the VM is stopped, the respective SKU which you have opted will be there for your needs. Sometimes what happens is when you stop the virtual machine, if the SKU is high in demand or not available at the data center, you won't be able to use that SKU. But that won't happen if you have enabled this option. Next we have is the proximity placement group. Proximity placement group allows you to place different virtual machines which you have closely together so that if there is any traffic flow between them, won't take much time and have low latency. Next is we can tag it according to our needs. We can use the environment like test or your cost center code or value. We can click on review and create, and we can see all the details which you have filled and correct it. Alright, so you can see for the SKU I've selected, I'm going to charge 7 INR per hour. You can see the details here, data disk, networking, each section, and if everything is okay, I can click on create. Also, when you create a VM or instance, there are multiple resources which get created. So one is the virtual machine instance and the various disk you create and the NIC with the VM. So you can see here also the estimated monthly cost, which will define estimate according to the region and all those additional resources you have selected. But we are going to check actual pricing in the pricing calculator page. For that, I'll search while it's being created. I'll go to pricing calculator, Azure, and I'm going to choose the virtual machines and the view. And the virtual machine, I'm going to download the private key and create the resource. So here in the calculator you can see the region. I can choose the region where I'm going to create the VM. I have selected the Central India. I'm going to choose the operating system Linux, and the type which I've opted is the RL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and the tier was the standard. This category will help you shortlist your particular SKU, which is for compute or GPU, all those, but I'm going to click on all. The SKU which I've selected is MS, which is 2 core and the 8 gigabytes of RAM and the 16 GB temporary storage. Also the count is 1, which is going to be run for 730 hours, so I can choose monthly. So now you can see the various pricing options which I get. So when I choose for pay as you go option, I get $86 per month. When I choose for a 1 year savings plan, that cost will get reduced to $65 monthly, and 3 year will even decrease more. The maximum discount which you get in a VM on reservations, with the reservation 1 year I get the charge $59 per month, and with the 3 year I get charged 45, which is nearby half of the pay as you go. So the software next of the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, if you have or not. So this we discussed while we create the VM. So if you have the license, you can enable with the Azure Hybrid benefit, which will reduce your the cost to zero. And if you do not have, you can use the pay as you go, which will be $21. So if you want to enable it for already created VM, you can go to operating system. Under operating system, you have is licensing. You can enable it from here, but this is my test subscription. I won't get the option. So next we have the managed disk. For my case, I enabled standard SSD, LRS for 64 gigabytes, and it was 2 disks. So this will cost me around $10 to 56 cents. And next is storage transactions. You can check the cost for this also, and the bandwidth, the networking. If you know the data, you can put up here and get the final cost of your VM. So this is how you can calculate the cost which you're going to create, and you can see the VM is created as well. If I go to resource group, I can see the various resources it created. So it created a Linux VM and the VM IP and the NSG and the VNet. Because I opted that option, it created the network interface, the disk, and the SSH key, right? So now if I go to the VM, I can see that all the details, the public IP, the SKU, the private IP address, source image details, all those options I can see. And now let's access this VM with the public IP. So I'm going to copy this. I can also go to connect, and I can use the native SSH select. So you can see it has given me the command. How can I access it? So I'll copy the command and I'll next go to the terminal. So I'll go to the directory where my key is, and I'll paste the command with the user and the IP, and I'll change the PEM file location, the one I created, test.pem, and click on enter. So before that, I need to change the permissions. For the PEM file, I need to change it to 400. Run the command 400 to my file, and I think it has changed. I'll again run the command. So you can see I have accessed my machine and I can click on the IP address to see the IPs. So I've accessed the VM, and we talked about the boot diagnostic when we created it, this will take the screenshot of the VM page and will show us. So you can see the VM is at the login page, and also you can click on serial console. And when you go to the serial console, you can access the VM directly with the username and password if you have enabled that option instead of a key. So this will give you a login prompt to access it from the Azure. This is how we can create the VM and have explored various options we get when we create it. Let me know if you have any questions or queries regarding this in the comment. Thank you.